this meeting with a pledge of allegiance. Thanks, Zach. Okay, a couple quick things that I want to point out that we did talk about yesterday. Well, let's just, there's a couple changes here that I want to just point out. Patricia did go back and amend these from what we talked about last time. So there is a change to what we talked about on line 41. The line that reads, their role is to review the council adopted budget and recommend or not recommend. And ultimately, the budget committee's budget goes on the proposed, is a word we added last time, proposed ballot. So that's one change. There was one that I did want to point out. So if we look at the meeting minutes, right there at line 156, toward the end of that line, there is a sentence that starts, Mr. Caddy said, the only one with telephones is library, and town administrator for 1 year said the library is separate, overseen by the library board of trustees. We had a discussion about the fact that Roger didn't think that he had made that comment. Patricia went back and listened to the audio recording. It wasn't real specific, so I just want to make one last check of the town council, or sorry, of the budget committee to see if anybody remembers making a question about
I rechecked my notes. That is in fact me. I had made the mention that there was only one line item regarding telephone.
Great. So I think at line 56, where we see Mr. Caddy, we will change that to get Mr. Gary Swanson, and that should solve this one. So with those two changes, oh, and we do have one other item that you wanted to amend.
Yeah, on line 61, 62, the town administrator said increases were going to debt service for the McAllen Dam, $191,220. I verified with the town administrator that the increase in debt service is $31,172, and the increase in principal is $100,000. So that statement needs some correction.
So are we thinking that we should amend that to debt service on the McAllen Dam is
Debt and principal would be $131,172.
Okay. So
Hold on. I don't know that you can change a he said line if he didn't say it.
Then I'll bring it up later and we'll document it in the record.
sure. I think for these meeting for this meeting, I think what we would mention is that we went back and took a look at the debt service for McAllen Dam, and just make note that the amount here of $191,220, $131,172 with debt principal.
She may be able to make an editorial note. It just can't be in his words because he didn't say it.
Right.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So do we have that correct, or do we want to change that?
I mean, to my knowledge, you can't go back and change something in the notes to make it factually correct. If that's what was said at the meeting, that's what was said.
Okay. We'll leave it at that.
So.
Okay. We'll leave it as is, and record that in tonight's meeting. That we have a change there. Great. With those three changes that we talked about, I'd like to sort of move to a vote to accept the meeting minutes from November 25th, 2019.
I move, so move.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks. Actually, we have the motion in
Okay.
acceptance. We're just going to go to a vote now.
Okay.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? opposed, and one abstaining, and Rob Orton's abstaining. Thanks, everybody. I did want to make another mention here. One of our members, Trevor McDonald, is not able to make this meeting tonight, so he has an excused absence. So thanks very much. All right, at this time, I would like to open this meeting to the public hearing. So any members of the public who would like to step forward and make comment on the FY21 Town of Newmarket budget, please do so. We will open at approximately 7:05.
Hi, I'm Tony Weinstein, 275 Ashland Road, and I'm chair of the Newmarket Town Council. And so I wanted to just take a minute to voice my support. I mean, it's our budget, so I suppose that it goes without saying that I support the budget that is in front of you. And just a couple thoughts about it. So first is I want to commend our department heads and our town administrator for the work that they do through this process. It's a tough process, and so not just the development of the budget, but also the management of the budget throughout the year, I think is really important. One of the things that previous town councils have done is so I've been on this is my 6th year, my 6th time through the budget process as a council member, and I was involved in years prior to that. And so I've seen councils year to year cut and cut and cut and cut, and with good reason. There was definitely some extra funding that could have been cut. We're not in a place where we can do that anymore. The town administrator and the department heads manage a really strict process and a strict budget, and we're grateful to them for the work that they do. And so I know that the budget in front of you represents an increase. Some of that, I think in years past, the increases were offset a little bit by the, whether it's $50 in postage from this line item or just a little bit here and there, we were able to offset some of the natural cost increases, things like insurance that, things that go up every year, or maybe fuel. The budget that that you guys have now, there are some increases. Debt service, as mentioned during your conversation about the minutes, is unavoidable. Contractual obligations are unavoidable. Personnel increases are pretty much unavoidable. Then in addition, one of the things, I know I don't think that the town administrator mentioned it during his presentation to you, but one of the reasons that the police budget has increased is the addition of another police officer. It's the first time that there will be an additional police officer in Newmarket since 1995, aside from the resource officer that was put into the elementary school last year. So it's pretty significant. The town, I think anyone who's been around for any number of years couldn't argue with the fact that our town has grown and our town has changed in that time, and certainly policing has changed in that time. I was going to say in the last 10 years, but 1995 is so much longer than that. So there's been a lot of changes, and I think that, I certainly support the addition of another police officer, and I know that Chief also obviously supports that and feels that he needs it. And I didn't bring the statistics with me, but the statistics that he cited for the number of calls that our officers field versus towns of similar size and in the area, it's pretty staggering what we're able to do with a relatively small force. And I think that that's true of our town in general. One of the things we had Municipal Resources come in and do a study 2 years ago, I think, And one of the things that they found, they found a lot of things that we do right. They had a lot of, places where we could improve. But one of the things, I think the overarching themes of that study was that we run a super tight ship. Sometimes to our detriment, right? Like there are times when we really probably should be doing, should have more resources available to us. So I think that the budget in front of you reflects a couple additional changes, not a lot. So again, I know that it's an increase, but I absolutely support it, and I think it's the right thing for our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Weinstein. Are there any other members of the public who want to step forward and make a comment on this year's budget? Come on up. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:12, and we'll move on to the next part of this meeting. It really is for the budget committee here to have a discussion of the budget. And so this is a chance for us to do a couple of things. We can accept a motion to accept the budget as is. We can also create motions to amend the budget as written, and to do so, we'll just take a motion in a second and then discuss, and we'll move to a vote in that process. So let me take a look around, and if you do have a suggestion for what we do next, go ahead and raise your hands. You're furthest away, so.
Pardon?
I think he beat me to it.
I was just gonna ask if we could ask some clarification questions to the town administrator.
Steve, if you're willing to step on up?
Absolutely. What can I do?
So I guess I can start with that since I asked for it. On page 45, it showed a $105,000 lease item, which I don't recall actually.
I'm sorry, I don't have the
Yes, and,
same document in front. Can you tell me which department?
sure, I believe it was building grounds.
Yes, that's the lease payment for the performance contracting. So basically, the town council entered into an agreement to do performance contracting, which allows us to upgrade our much aging electrical, heating, those kind of items. But what we do is you actually enter into a lease purchase agreement to do that. So that's what the lease payment is actually to pay for the new boilers here, solar panels, a new roof at the fire station, those kind of upgrades. What we're actually paying with, we have to budget as a whole number, but we pay by the savings that we receive from the energy savings.
Any other questions? I had another one.
Go ahead.
If
Yeah,
no one
ask
else does. I was just curious regarding the capital reserve funding amounts.
Mm-hmm.
Are there specific items that we're looking to fund in the future? For instance, roadway improvements. We have a line item for roadway improvements already, but yet we also have the capital reserve. So I was just wondering, those specific items, or capital reserve items, you could kind of maybe articulate any planned usage in the current?
We have a 10-year road improvement plan that we try to get to all the roads. That's usually what the life of it is. So I don't have it off the top of my head which roads for this year, but we do have a road improvement plan.
And so those capital reserve funds required in addition to the line item that we already have for roads
Yes.
and bridges?
Oh yeah, yes. We the council's been trying to invest more into the roads because we just hadn't for so many years. That there are a number of roads that are just in really rough shape. We were lucky. I believe it was last year that the governor's budget included extra funds that were really able to do a number of roads. But yes, that's what the intent of that is: more money to go towards roads at this point in time. And again, this is one of those ones where if we don't use it all, if it goes to capital reserve, we can save it for the next year.
Let me make my way down the table first, Dan, if you don't mind. Frederick Addy.
As I had noted in earlier, the budget, proposed budget is around 15% increase over the previous year. The McAllen Dam is 0.25% of that 15%. Don't understand how the town council can believe that they should raise taxes by 15% next year. Most of our residents probably have not gotten a raise like that in a long time, if ever. I think we have to look very carefully at where we're spending money and how we're spending money. There's $157,000 in reserves for recreation. We're adding another 86,000 to that. Do we really need close to $250,000 for recreation? Is that a necessity? Town council has said that there are a lot of mandatory things, and there are, but I don't understand how we can be proposed spending at a rate that's, I think, beyond our capacity as a town. The preceding 5 years have averaged 4.3% per year, which is still greater than the inflation or the cost of living increase in this area by just about double. But I don't see how we can continue to think that we can raise taxes 15%. I have some specific ideas,
Before
but I
we
would
keep saying 10%, it's not 15. The tax rate increase is actually 10. The budget increase is 9.46. I just want to make sure the number is correct for the percentages.
I'm sorry.
Last year's tax rate is $5.71 per
I'm
thousand.
talking about the amount being raised by taxes.
Yes, 9.46% is what the town council is recommending. The department heads are recommending 14.73. The town administrator is recommending 9.42, and the town council is recommending 9.46.
Unless I'm mistaken, maybe I am, and I certainly, the amount to be raised by taxes in 2020 is $5,374,531.
That's net town appropriation.
The amount of that for 2021 is $6,176,947, which is roughly 15% increase.
Okay, so the numbers we usually traditionally, I thought you were saying the full budget, which is the 13.2.
Yeah.
That's what the,
I'm concerned about the amount that has to be raised by taxes. It's up 15% in this proposed budget, is it not?
Let me jump in here and just make a quick comment. I think it's a valid question, but I do want to get back to sort of the reason why we're meeting here today. We've had the working session. I think this is a chance for us to, talk about sort of the bottom line number here, and I don't want to sort of say that anything that you're saying is not correct, but I do want to encourage members of the budget committee that as we're here to talk about something, we want to talk about either clarifying questions that we have, or if we feel like we want to make a motion to reduce or raise the bottom line number of the budget. That is really the way we should proceed with a motion, a second, a discussion, and a vote. So Mr. Gadd, I don't want to take anything away from what the questions you've asked, and maybe Steve.
I do want to clarify. Yes, the net town appropriation is increasing by 15%. The budget is increasing by 9.46%. The tax rate would increase by 10%. So I just want to make sure we're using, so the net of town appropriation, that's not the budget, that's not the number that goes on the ballot. The number that goes on the ballot is 13.2 million. I just want to clarify for the public. not-
That's fine, and
Yeah.
that's a good clarification. However, the amount that is seen by taxpayers is what's in their tax bill.
Mhm.
And if it's up 15%, because we have to raise 15% more dollars in taxes, then they're going to think it's 15%, independent of what, quote, the budget says.
So let me just sort of draw this back into sort of a motion. Would you seek the budget committee to make a motion to amend that amount of 13 million?
I'm sorry, but I'm new to the committee, so I don't understand the process. I thought we could have a discussion. We didn't have a meaningful discussion. We asked a bunch of questions. We didn't have any more discussion. We did not have a working session subsequent to discuss the town after asking the administrator for some clarifications. So when do we have that discussion, or do I just make a motion and we don't have any discussion, but your minutes, your agenda passed out to me said, please note the budget committee can only make changes if they were disclosed, discussed at the public hearing. I would like to disclose and discuss at this public hearing.
Sure, and I think.
If making a motion is what's necessary in order to have a discussion, I'll be happy to do so.
I would encourage that. Thank you. Maybe we come back in a few minutes, because then there's a couple of people that either have questions
Yep.
or do you want to make a motion?
No, no question. but
No question.
If I can do a motion unless someone else has a question.
Sure, I think. Go ahead, Christian. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just one quick one. I think we covered this last time, but the insurance P and L, the $99,894 that's relatively new to this year's budget, was that something moved from other items?
It
or-
was. It used to be in HR. Doesn't make sense to be in HR.
Okay.
It's not a human resources cost. It's a town cost.
All right, thank you.
Christian, I'm looking back to you just because that's where we left off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to make a motion to reduce the FY '21 Town of Newmarket budget by $700,000.
Second that motion.
And what would the
Yeah, so it would be 700,000 reduction for a total of $12,533,167.
so we have a motion by Christian Matthews and a second by Gary Swanson. I'll open up this to discussion.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is just to thank all the department heads, town council, town admin, all the municipal staff that went into this budget. I know it's a lot of work. I know that everyone put in a lot more time than they probably should have, but I think we all appreciate it. So I'm just gonna run through a couple numbers really quick. So I am using the total budget numbers. So I went back to FY 2013. And when you look at a 7-year trend for budget increase from 2013, FY 2013, FY 2020, we're averaging about a 2.39% increase. That does factor in the compound growth rate when you get to 2020. That's essentially CPI. That's really good, our 7-year trend. The concern is when we bring in the proposed budget we have now, it will increase our 7-year trend of 2.39% to an 8-year trend of 3.25%. So that will essentially increase our trend rate by 36%. And I think that's what my concern is. If we forecast that into 2022, to keep that number of 3.25%, we're looking at only an increase next year of 2.95%. So my concern with that number being so high and such an increase is I don't see where it's going to go next year. So the reason that I suggested a reduction of $700,000, and I hope we can discuss it, is that represents an 8-year trend of 2.57%. I think that when you look at our 7-year trend of 2.39, I think that's a little low from where it could or should be when compared to CPI. I think when you look at an 8-year trend rate of 2.57%, so that would be that budget number of $12,533,167. I think it says the town can absolutely manage their finances. I think it sets us on a very good financial track. And I think that that number is where we want to be as a town. You know, when we look over 8 years, going up by 2.5% average each year, I think it's very fair to the taxpayers. I think it's very fair to the town. And I think that's a better number than going up, increasing our average trend over 8 years by 36%. This increased it by 5%. It represents a total budget increase from last year of 3.67%. So we're still increasing our budget by a decent chunk, but when we look at our average, we're much better in that average range. So I'd be more than happy to, I have Excel all loaded up here, but I think that's what I have to say.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the committee members' philosophy on the increase, and I understand where it's coming from. However, I do want to reiterate what the chair or the council said. We put off a number of projects because we were waiting to find out what the school was going to do since 2013. We didn't do roads. We didn't do our own capital improvements because of the school. We said, look, we're not going to try to go out there with any huge projects for our own good because we knew there was going to be an impact on the school. Yes, this is the first time you're going to see the increase of this amount. My concern is, and I can tell you where, since the budget committee cannot tell the council what to reduce, we're going to have to reduce staff. I mean, a lot of these things are already contractually obligated. So I'm going to have to look at eliminating all contribution to capital reserve funds, eliminating roads, can't pave roads this year, to get up to that 700,000. So there's about, I'm not even at 700,000 yet, because of contractual obligations. I still have to hire a finance director because the contract with this school broke. So I need to fill that position. Probably won't have that new police officer on the road. These aren't items that we put in there to do, say, buying a fire truck or buying something that we could put off a year or two. These are items that we have been putting off that we need now. That would be my only concern if we did go with 700,000. Again, the council has been putting off a number of projects because of other items out there. And I think by cutting the operating budget by 700,000 is a huge hit.
Thanks, Steve.
Christian, can you repeat the 7-year trend that we had and your proposal?
Yep, so the FY 2013 to 2020 is a 2.39% trend. The current proposed budget, looking at 8 years, is 3.25%, and the reduction of 700,000 is a 2.57%.
What was that first one again?
2.39.
2.39. Okay, I had 2.9, and I was trying to figure out how
So,
we got
so
lower.
that's
But that makes
because
sense.
In FY18 there was the municipal wastewater bond of $1,138,000. I took that out because it's was enterprise user funds. I don't really think it's fair to include that in our as a baseline for when we're calculating budgets. You know, from 2017 to 2018, the budget would have gone up 19%. It didn't actually go up by 19% because of that bond. It went up by 7.5%. I think the concern is that in 2014 we're going up 1%. In 2015 we're going up basically 0. 2016 0. 2017 5. 2018 7.5. 2019 6. 2020 negative 0.5. So we have such wide swings that for us to have a 9.5% swing in a year that we have an assessment, I really feel like we should have a goal of trying to more level fund. So instead of saying 0 and cutting our budgets, it just doesn't make sense. I think that there are times and projects where you're going to have to go over your goal target, but it's a lot better for the taxpayers and all of us, especially with an assessment, to see it a little bit more level, a little bit more steps, so you're not going down rapidly up, going down. And I think that by setting a goal for that 2.5% number, I think that really helps us get to there.
I'm with you, and I've been watching the trends since I got on the committee, and this is the first big bump. And I'm worried about the cutting it right away and not easing into it. It sounds like putting it off, and it could be. Another committee, would be elected, and they may not feel the same way. But can you speak a little bit to that? Like, did you think about how you might ease into this? So it would be 700 the first year?
Yeah, so when you look at that second year trend, essentially it's going to result, I think, in a little bit about 9% of total increases over this year, next year. So if you want to increase the budget by 4.5% this year, we might not want to do that number, but if you want to max out your contribution this year, that number is pretty good to then cover you for next year to continue with the trend. Like, I can't control the budget committee for next year. We don't know if we're going to have a massive project that's going to hit next year. That's where I think just focusing on what a goal and acceptable trend rate is, and just, to me, the 2.57% I think gives the town a little bit more wiggle room. I don't think we can hold them to a CPI. I think that's very unfair. But I think we also need to say from a taxpayer perspective that going above 3%, that's a hard number to swallow.
Well, and I think, I should back up and thank the council and thank the town administrator. And we also met, as a new member, met with several of the department heads, and I was awestruck of what they've been able to accomplish on such a limited budget. But it does seem like there's some areas that we can trim. But the other point I was going to make is that we also need to, we did put things off because of the school, but now we do also have the school. So we're looking at this budget, and that's fine. That's what we should do, exclusive of the school budget. But as members of the town, we also have to realize that there's also going to be a hit from the school budget, and it's probably going to go up. So, maybe we could amend the motion, but we need to take kind of a global view.
Christian, if you said, what if we said 400,000? If we knocked 400,000, my concern is the police station. My concern is the police force. Right now, the roads I travel are great, but that's because we fix them. I don't do them all. Those are my two concerns. I do love the new roads. I've been here for 27 years, I think now, and it's nice not to lose my axle. So, and my concern obviously is always the police safety, for their safety and for ours.
Yeah. So, as Steve said, we can't control the line items. We've heard some suggestions. I hope the town council would go and have a discussion about where to look at. I hope they'd have it open to the public, but I'm not focusing on specific line items. I'm focusing on long-term goal setting that I think we should be following.
Christian, if I may,
Yeah.
we had that discussion. That was our budget public hearing that we had just a couple months back, where we looked at these numbers, we looked at what the department had said they needed to have. We made fairly strict, guidelines for what we found was acceptable to bring a number that we thought that could be stomached. And, I respect the fact that it's a lot. I'm fairly anti-taxation, but I think to go to our department heads and just say, hey, well, you don't deserve the budget to do the work that we've asked you to do is not necessarily fair. And I'm also kind of curious, is your concern a dollar amount? Is it a percentage amount? Is it budgetary items? Or is it just,
Yeah, so I apologize. I couldn't bring that feedback to that meeting. I wasn't able to attend, but I do watch all the videos, and I can appreciate everything that you all did. The concern, again, is the long-term trend that this number will increase our average increase by year by 36%. That's a huge jump. And is that sustainable? What happens next year? We can't really focus on it. We need to focus on the year here. And for me, seeing a 36% increase across a 7-8 year span is too high. So again, I'm not going to focus on specific line items, police, work, infrastructure, staff. What I can say is that from a trend perspective, we need to have a goal, we need to set a goal, and is jumping 36% in 1 year fair? Or is following a little bit more level funding, try to stabilize a little bit more in the budget, so we're not cutting the budget by 0.5% or keeping it at 0. Maybe next year we'll look at increasing the budget 2.57%, or 3%, maybe the year after 1.5%. If we look at our long-term trends, I think that's our barometric for success.
Let me pull Steve Fournier back in first.
Just to also let the committee know that by cutting 700,000, you're not even meeting the contractual obligations pursuant to the default budget. Default budget, we're already estimating at 12.8. So it's a reduction from the default.
What is the default?
The default, we're looking at 12.8, 12.85. So it's actually, like I said, it's a reduction. We're not meeting the contractual obligations. Because that's where you determine the contractual obligations. You take the default budget, you take the previous year's budget, add contractual obligations, subtract any one-time costs, and that's how you get there.
But you are able to submit a budget that is lower than the default budget.
You absolutely are.
Yeah.
But I wanted to state
Yeah.
the statement that we would not be meeting contractual obligations. That's why we'd have to do a reduction in services.
Yeah.
Dan, you had a comment?
Sure nobody else wants to jump in?
Okay. I'm sorry, Chris. There were a couple of years with zero growth, right? And one negative growth?
Yeah, I mean, 2015 minus
so-
0.1. I
So
think
that's
a lot.
really not fair to say, okay, let's do a trend line where in the past years, a number of 3 out of the 5 years or whatever, that they had, zero growth or even a negative growth there. Is that, that's really not fair to do a
I'm not doing-
trend
I'm
line
not
based
doing
on that.
I'm not doing any linear growth. I'm simply averaging those increases together. So it's not creating a linear growth.
I know there's a concern that the tax rate is higher but it's really not, to me, it's not the town portion, it's the school portion that's driving the tax rate here. My personal opinion, and it's a fair budget, in that, they're asking for minimal increases. They have looked at this budget. They have made cuts where they think they could make the cuts. And I think that, 700,000 is a significant number to knock off the bottom line that they're asking for.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk about the school budget here.
I'm just saying that, that's where the real issue, I think, is.
In your opinion.
Yeah.
And it is
Sure,
what it
some
is.
people think differently about, So I think we're just talking about the municipal.
Hmm? Okay, well, anyway, my comment is, I don't think that that's fair to cut off $700,000 to get you to a trend line where a couple of the years have been zero growth or negative growth. Okay.
Thanks. Dan, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what Joe was saying. I mean, you really are, the net appropriation is going up by 800,000. You're talking cutting 700,000 of it. That basically leaves you the 100,000, not even, sorry, what the McAllen Dam is going up, which I believe is 136. We've got police contracts that were approved by the voters. These are commitments that we've made to the employees of our town. Apologies, I don't find your math compelling. A percentage of a trend line is not really mathematically significant, and particularly when it has been a bumpy path along the way, and some years where the town has held to a zero increase. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on the argument about, certain things were put off because of what was anticipated for the school. I wasn't part of those discussions, and, I don't have an opinion on that one way or the other, but, what I do think is if you're gonna talk about cutting this all the way down to the point that we're not even keeping up with the increase in cost on the McAllen Dam, I can't justify that in my mind, that, that you really are at that point going below things that the voters have already approved in past years, and to achieve, a trend line that's admittedly against a very uneven history, it doesn't seem compelling to me.
Could you just clarify the 800,000 number? So
Sure. Net appropriation is going from 5.374 to 6.176, correct?
Yes.
So that's an 800,000 increase, and that's basically it's about 1,133,000 on the expenditures line, offset by about 340,000 on the revenues line. So, you know, the revenues to some extent are tied in many ways to certain items anyway, are tied to the increases in the expense line. You've got rec is more or less tied to rec, solid waste is directly tied to solid waste, water is directly tied to water, because those are, you know, flow-throughs. So, you know, when it comes right down to it, what you're really talking about is cutting an 800K increase in the appropriation by 700K, which again doesn't even keep up with the debt service on the McAllen Dam.
Thanks, everybody. This is one of the, I think, more healthy discussions that the Budget Committee has had over the last couple of years. So I know a lot of thought went into this. I think this is sort of the purpose of why we come together, is to sort of dive deep these numbers and talk about, you know, suggestions and solutions. I want to move to a vote on this motion before us. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I don't miss anybody's comments on this motion specifically. Yes, Mr. Caddy?
I'd like to amend the motion to a $325,000 reduction instead of $700,000, which represents a budget increase to 5% overall.
You know, I'd love to treat this as two separate votes. One on the original $700,000 reduction, and then if we want to make a
Okay.
second motion for 300, I think that's the right way to do it. So I'm going to move to a vote on Mr. Matthews' motion to reduce the FY21 budget by $700,000.
Steve, do we need a roll call vote for this, or is it by voice?
You know, you don't need to, but I would because of the recording secretary not being here.
Great. So roll call vote. Representative McKinney? Mr. Ortens?
No.
Mr. Rabb?
No.
Mr. Lamatina?
No?
I'm Mr. Burns. I will say no.
No.
I'm gonna say nay.
No.
Yes.
No.
Great. So 9 noes and 1 yay. The motion does not pass. Thank you very much for bringing that forward. At this time, I will take any other motions.
I move that we reduce the budget by $325,000. This would represent then a budget with a 5% increase over previous year, which is higher than the running average, but takes into account things like McAllen Dam.
Great. So we have a motion before the Budget Committee to reduce the FY21 budget by $300,000. Do we have a second?
I'll second that one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Open for discussion.
I have a question for the town administrator. Steve, how would that affect us?
I mean, so be a cut. I mean, I'm just off the top of my head, I'm looking at things. Contribution to the capital reserves would be reduced. I mean, I'd have to, if I don't want to impact services, then I'd have to look at contributions to social services.
Mm-hmm.
Other items would be, I'd have to look at HR, because we are looking at increasing an HR position.
Would it affect any projects that we'd had on the docket?
Probably under something would be capital reserve contributions.
Okay.
So, like we're putting 75,000 for public works for vehicles. I'll probably cut that. Fire department 50 for equipment. I'll have to cut that. Those are contributions to capital reserves. I mean, I'd have to look at it, but I'd have to come up with a number.
Thank you.
When you say social services, do you mean heat, oil, Meals on Wheels?
I I mean Meals on Wheels, I mean Child and Family Services, I mean CAP, I mean those kind of items. Wouldn't have to make a reduction. What I'd probably do is go to last year's budget and remove any that were added,
And
just to be fair.
Just to completely clarify, when you say you would do these things, these are the things you would
Recommend to the
propose to the
council.
council?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Kenny.
Yeah, my number of reduction is less than the difference between what we're putting into and what we're taking out of capital reserves. I'm all for capital reserves, but it appears that what we do is we put money in, we put $50,000 in, we take $40,000 out. That's kind of the capital reserve keeps building. We have $535,000 that we're going to put into capital reserves, and we're going to take $130,000 out. And it seems to me that $400,000 that's going into capital reserves is something that you could look closely at without having to reduce Meals on Wheels or headcount.
For my clarification, where's the withdrawal of the 135? Under revenues?
Under revenue
Okay, I just wanna
from
make sure.
capital funds,
Yep, so,
130,700.
correct, that's actually not coming from those capital reserves, those are coming from water capital reserves, because we already know that's budgeted. Whenever we don't budget for the withdrawal from those capital reserve funds, we don't have to, the council just votes as the governing body. I just want I just want clarification. Yeah.
I find it very confusing that the water and sewer, which are enterprise funds, are sprinkled, are two line items, but then the results of things outside of those line items are sprinkled throughout the budget. It seems to me those are enterprise, and they should not be counted in revenue for the town.
We
if
have
that's the
to.
case.
By state law, we have to include those in there. We have to have the budget, they have to be included.
But you can't categorize them as water and sewer?
They're still enterprise funds, but by law, we still have to book them.
I understand that, but for the purpose of our trying to understand this, my personal trying to understand this, I can't tell that that's an enterprise fund. There are a number of places where there's a great deal of confusion in how the bookkeeping's kept.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify that. There's no confusion for staff or
Yeah.
anybody on how bookkeeping. Well, I just want to make sure, because if we say there's confusion on how bookkeeping's kept, then the rumors get out there that we don't know where the money's going. It's a different type, this is not the
I
normal.
apologize.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that, no.
It's-
It's just very hard to understand the budget. And all I'm saying is that I just don't think the taxpayer should be faced with a huge increase in taxes. It's way beyond the CPI.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your clarifications. I think, Christian Matthews, you got another question?
Just a comment. Again, I think whenever we submit, I would hope that the council and Steve would target priorities first. So to hear social services grants are going to be cut before new infrastructure, that's somewhat concerning to me.
Yeah, I hear it.
I would just say, it seems like, as a sewer user and a water user, it seems like we could increase some of those to offset some of the solid waste disposal costs for them. as
We
well as
can't.
Bag fees.
Yeah, we can't.
Right.
You can't take the funds that are appropriated through the rates and go towards the tax rate. So I can't take water and sewer to go towards solid waste. Again, we are looking at increasing bags for solid waste. It's not going to get anywhere near.
No, of course.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, looking at bags that are $5 to $10 per bag to cover it completely for solid waste. You just don't have the volume. But yeah, you can't take the money from water and sewer to go offset the rest of the budget.
So I guess maybe you could just clarify, why is the sewer fund going down by 2.4%? Isn't there an increase in the disposal fees for sewer? For the solid waste generated from the sewer, the water treatment plant?
There's a
Isn't that
slight,
go-
but he's gonna be able to, he's not, let me double check his budget.
I may be using municipal solid waste.
Yeah, the entire wastewater budget is going down by $41,232 or negative 2%. It's a reduction of $15,000 in interest, reduction of $19,000 in principal, a reduction in $10,000 electricity, and a reduction of about $20,000 in engineering. But that's not solid waste. That's wastewater. Solid waste is garbage, wastewater.
Sure. But isn't part of the water treatment plant disposal, hasn't their disposal fees increased as well?
There's
It's being
a slight
offset,
increase in disposal of sludge.
But it's being offset by these other.
Correct, it's
reductions.
$29,000
Gotcha.
increase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we might want to move to a vote on Mr. Caddy's motion to reduce the FY '21 budget by $300,000, and in keeping with our last pattern, which went so well, I'm going to do it again by rule. Looking to you first, Elizabeth.
I'm going to say nay.
Nay as well.
Jeff Rapp.
No.
No.
Tina. Mickey Burns votes no. Dan Smith.
Nay.
Yes.
Gary Swanson votes yes.
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 No.
And a no. 7 to 3, the motion does not pass. Thanks, everybody.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that the Budget Committee accept as is the proposed town budget. of
Second.
Whatever the amount is, 13,233,167.
Okay, we have a motion before the committee to accept the town council's budget as presented at $13,233,167. I will open I have a second by Zach. Jumon, thank you very much. I'll open for discussion.
I'll just add, reiterate what I said earlier. I know there's concern about the tax rate in the town. I think it is a fair budget. It's the school portion is really the piece that's driving the tax rate, and that's not for discussion tonight.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, since I'm going to have to write the warrant, the vote tonight is also going to reflect the recommendation of the committee. So if it's 10 to 2, or 8 to 2, then that's going to show on the ballot, recommended by the Municipal Budget Committee, 8 to 2. I just want to make sure that's what the intention of the committee is as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're ready to take a vote on this.
I think there's some discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
To clarify what Steve was saying, I think we all know that this vote will go on the bottom of the ballot when we're there in May.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, in March.
Yeah. So again, this number represents a 9.46% increase on the total appropriation. If this budget fails, the default budget, $12,850,000, would cut this budget by $383,167. I think the gamble is, will taxpayers vote for a 9.5% increase? If not, we lose $383,000. I think it's a risk that's a little high. I also, again, think that increasing our 8-year trend from 2013 to 21 by 3.25% is too high. I think that increasing that by 36% is too high. I think the math works out in my head. CPI of 2 to 2.1, point plus on CPI. I think this is a gamble, and I don't think it's worth the gamble.
Thank you. With no other comments, I'm going to go to a vote, and we'll do it a third time by a voice vote. So this is to approve the budget.
Recommend.
Recommend that we accept the budget as presented at $13,238,167. Elizabeth McKinney.
Yay.
Rob Orton. Jeff Rabb.
Yes.
Joe Lamantina.
Yes.
Nikki Burns votes yes. Dan
Ye-
Smith.
Yay.
Gary Swanson.
Nay.
Roger Caddy.
Nay.
Christian Matthews.
Nay.
Zach Dumont.
Aye.
So the motion passes 7-2. The budget committee.
8-2.
Sorry.
7-3.
3.
7 to, sorry, excuse me, 7-3.
Okay, all right.
And we will move this as written to the warrant article.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I just want to let the committee know as well, you will have to hold a public hearing on a debt issuance for the town of $75,000 for an upgrade study for the water system. Problem with this debt issuance is it's a 1-to-1 payment. We received we issued debt of $75,000. We immediately receive a grant for $75,000 to pay that off, but we do have to go through the process of issuing debt. So you will have to do that after the first of the year, prior to the deadlines. So I got to double check the date, sometime in early January.
Okay. So this is our last meeting of the year. We won't be back in session until, I think, January 6th.
You should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the members for open discussion.
For the warrant article, we have to have the actual wording of that, is that true?
Steve, when do we look at the warrant article and approve them?
Yeah, so this one is prescribed by law. It just says to see if the town will raise and appropriate the annual budget of 13 point, I'm just blank, I'm sorry. So that one you've already made the recommendation. The second one will be prescribed by law, also to issue debt. You'll have that in time to review that one. Those are the only two that you make a recommendation for, because it's the only two that are raising funds. There are going to be 8 other questions, but those are all charter amendments. So that's just the council's recommendation on there.
Great, thank you. Okay, as a last order of business, I just wanted to talk to everybody about our upcoming meetings. We have invited the representatives from the school, the school district to come back on January 16th for a second working session. There were a few numbers that we did not have in front of us when we met last week, and so we have invited Dr. Newman to come on back and answer any questions that we might have, as well as supply us with some additional information that we were looking for. So our next meeting is going to be on January 16th. Your agenda says possible. I was able to confirm that late today, but not in time to sort of change that one word. So we will be back here at 7 p.m. on January 6th. And January 13th, we will have our school district budget public hearing.
January what?
So January 6th is our next meeting.
Yep.
We will also be meeting on January 13th.
13 is this, yep.
So 6 is the working group, second working group.
6 is the second working group, correct.
Do you, for the school meeting, the 6th, can we get the detail behind, that
Yeah,
we made
it's-
comment about that?
Yeah, as Dr. Gibbons mentioned when we met last week, she is still working on pulling that together. Unfortunately, the timing between when we met last and tonight wasn't, it was just a little too quick, so she's still working on some things over to us. I expect to have them, she said by next week, so before the end of this week, we should have those in our hand and have sort of a couple weeks to digest. Elizabeth, I don't know if you have more details on dates beyond
You
that?
should have them by the end of the week. We just had to wait for Marie to
Yep.
get here.
Do you know if we'll have the summary of the audit as well?
I know that was one of the things that we asked for her, that said she would present to us, so we'll just double check to make sure we get some of the audit.
Thank
as
you.
well. Yeah. She hasn't, she wouldn't give it to us.
It's probably in the records, too. You can print it out yourself, but it's pretty thick.
Yeah, summary.
Yeah.
Great, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Zach. Second by
Second.
Jerry Swanson. Oh, sorry, by Roger Caddy.
We get confused there.